World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
On Easter Sunday, the 27th of March 2016, World Jam Global Radio presents a night called Back Against the Wall. This is to be held at the Pride of Tottenham, 614 High Road, London, N17 9TA. You will be entertained musically on the night with the sounds of R&B, lovers rock, rare grooves and other genres of music. Your DJs on the night will be DJ Matt from World Jam Global Radio, DJ Romantic CT from Heart of Love Radio, DJ Laro from World Jam Global Radio, DJ Mighty from Vibes FM, and DJ John J.E. from World Jam Global Radio. There will be food available on the night, cooked up especially by the original Panman. So make sure you eat some food and burn off those calories. So bring out your nearest and dearest for a trip down memory lane. Dress code on the night, smart and sophisticated. Doors open 9 p.m. and go on till 4 a.m. Tickets priced at £10 in advance, 15 on the door, will be available from the following outlets: worldjamglobal.com, located on the events page. Eventbrite.com, search Back Against the Wall. Booking fees will apply. Or the events hotlines 07802 30 24 50. Easter Sunday, 27th of March 2016. Back Against the Wall. Be there or be rare.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
I want to say a very special good evening going out to you from Kervin Julian right here on World Jam Global Radio. Here's another explosive edition of Issues Today.
I paid for my crime.
And as we close out the final week of our Black History Month, we have with us today a selection of what I would refer to as celebrated guests with a very informed and educated state of mind. We're going to take you on a journey looking back at some of the subjects and the cases that we've looked at for this month. We're going to talk about the systemic, institutionalized racism that exists within law enforcement right across the United States of America, and how that affects.
I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet.
We take a quick look,
I had
a glimpse,
over the street,
a preview.
Money, life is so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game is
into the Kendrick Johnson Show.
I'm a change.
Bearing in mind that next week, Saturday, right here on World Jam Global Radio, we actually have Kendrick Johnson's mother, Jacqueline Johnson, right here.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Talking about the very case that's got the nation undecided.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We answered some vital questions on that particular show.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
And believe you me, that's a show not to miss.
Whatever
you've been doing, do remember that today, the 27th of February, marks 4 years to the day of the death of Trayvon Martin and the birth of Black Lives Matter. What an appropriate way to end the Black History Month.
If I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump.
Now by looking at another case, a series of cases that represents,
I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The hatred, the abuse of power,
he could be facing life in prison.
The abnegation and negligence of duty.
Already did my time.
That is witnessed in today's law enforcement right across the United States of America. We may well compare that with some of the issues that are taking place right here in the UK. But in the meantime, it's time to introduce our guest.
Already did my time. Never my crime.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
And first and foremost, let me introduce my sidekick, my right hand, ever present, the impressible Dr. David Ramey.
Hello, Kervin.
How are we doing, David? How is it in America today, sir?
Well, how should it be in America today? I want to say hello to all of our guests, to Linda, to Sharon, to Alex, to all of them, and Justin, Simon. I'm telling you, it's a gorgeous day today in Connecticut. I'm looking out over my ocean. I see 6 lighthouses, and I think I see Dover Cliffs. Either that or I've engaged in that Rhode Island marijuana. Now, let me say this. Black History Month cannot be taken for granted. The statistics of incarcerated African American males is disgusting for a civilized country. More than 5 times what it is for white people. More than 3 times what it is for Hispanic people. And why are they incarcerated? Why are they in these gulags of profit-making industry by Wall Street financiers? Because of drugs. As if drugs don't exist on Wall Street, in suburban homes, in white families, in Hispanic families, in Asian families. Do you think the opiate dens of London and America developed in Africa or in China? For God's sake, between 1985 and 1995, the American prison population of drug offenders increased from 38,000 black African males in America to 250,000. 250,000. 29% of all African Americans born from 1991 have a chance of spending time in prison, in a gulag, in a profit-making incinerator in which their lives are burned and shredded. In 2014, 6% of all black males from 30 to 39 were in prison, compared to only 2% of Hispanic and 1% of whites. I put up a post yesterday on my Facebook, and I have the most dynamic world record-setting Twitter and Facebook in the entire world. It is dynamic. It is full of truth. It is in-your-face apple pie. And let me say this. I showed all the presidents of the United States, every one of them white, all 43, until you get to number 44. And number 44 is the only one disrespected, called a liar on the floor of the United States Congress, denied a Supreme Court justice appointee, blocked for his international relations. And I pointed out, is there a coincidence here that the only chocolate bar in this vanilla suitcase is an African American named President Obama? Is there racism here? And you know what someone wrote me? Why do you think it's racism? Why do you think it's racism? I don't know. Why do you think there's salt in the ocean? Shut up. I'm so sick of people pretending there's no racism. Now look at Governor Rick Snyder. He poisoned an entire majority African-American city called Flint, Michigan. Now, evidence has come out that for an entire year, he knew he was poisoning with lead and other poisons the people of Flint, Michigan. He knew it. His own lawyer named Gadola said to him, look, this is very serious. My mother lives in Flint, Michigan. It's downright scary to know that my mother is drinking water full of human poop, defecate, cuneiform E. coli diseases, and lead poisoning. And what did the governor say? He said, oh, I'm so sorry. We didn't connect the dots. Does that sound like a Bush defense? He didn't connect the dots, and therefore America was attacked, and 3,000 Americans were jumping out of the World Trade Center after it had been bombed because they hadn't connected the dots. Here's what I say. If the Republican Party puts up imbeciles who can't connect the dots, put them back in preschool. We don't need them. If you can't draw lines and you can't connect dots, you can't lead the greatest nation in the entire world, as you call it. Now, I don't think it's the greatest nation. I think all nations have the potential to be great. Not all of them have the opportunity to fulfill it. And speaking of that, now they're going to be voting in Texas on Tuesday. Do you know what? They tried to prevent blacks from voting. And in Texas, if you have a gun license, that means a gun license. That's something you can carry into the university, into a church, and shoot people like they did in Charleston. You can vote with that gun license. That's a proper ID. But if you're at the university and you're a professor of medicine like I was, or if you're a professor of philosophy or science, you cannot use your university ID to vote. You can vote if you're a moron white trash from a trailer park with a 45 caliber pistol license, but you can't vote if you teach Einsteinian physics. Now explain that to me. Now let me tell you something else the Republicans are doing. Now they've got their situation here where they created the Tea Party of Frankenstein. And Frankenstein has developed into Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. And the free Frankensteins are sitting up on stage talking about each other's weight, wetting their pants, their big ears, their makeup, and all kind of degrading, insulting, disgusting things that I don't really care about. Instead of talking about incarceration, justice, health care, reform, laws, the Supreme Court, they're talking about sweating on the stage and wetting each other's pants. Is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in the United States of America. And it's a raging panic in the GOP, and it's one that they deserve themselves. Now, let me say the last bit of news before I get on with the show and my brilliant allies. Today, I read something in the paper from Frank Eltman, and it's in New York. The former Suffolk County Police Chief, James Burke, a 51-year-old who led one of the country's largest suburban police departments, had a police van, car, or what do you call these, SUVs. A boy broke in to his van, and the boy found a box of cigars, a magazine of ammunition, some handcuffs, a gun belt, a cat of nine tails, and some other sex toys and pornography, video pornography. Well, the police chief was furious, so he took the boy into the police station with 11 other police officers and beat the living heck out of him. He beat him up, he interrogated him, he punched him, he cursed him, he spat on him, he urinated on him, and then he threatened to kill the boy and say he had died of a heroin overdose. And why did he get into this fury? According to the prosecutor in court, the police chief reacted in this way because the boy had the audacity to call the police chief a pervert. He called him a pervert, so he was punched, cursed, urinated on, threatened to be murdered with a heroin overdose.
So not because he broke into the van, not because he committed a criminal act.
No, because he called him a pervert because he had sex toys, cufflinks, and cat of nine tails and pornography. And 11 other police officers conspired with the police chief, remained silent, helped beat the poor boy, and then the boy had to go to jail for 3 years, and the police chief is going to plead guilty now and maybe serve 18 months. Wow. Now, is that not the dregs of society as we see it today? Wow. So that's the way it is in America, and I'm so happy to be with all my good friends. Let us... one more thing before I finish. I want to put out... I'm going to put out a plea. I'm going to put out a challenge. I want everybody listening in the whole world. I'm going to say something very important. There can be no justice for anyone in America. Not Black Lives Matter, not Women's Lives Matter, not White Lives Matter, not Poor Lives Matter. There can be no justice in America until we get the Supreme Court to recognize the individual privacy, liberty, and dignity of every human being. And I call upon every person who loves justice, change, action in America to march on Washington on July 4 this year and demand the Senate approve President Obama's justice for the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Let this July 4th be a rebirth of our freedom in this country.
Thank you very much for that. What's going on in America today, David? And I'm quite sure former Chief of Police Justin Powers, when he comes on very shortly, might have something to say about that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fun is the wrong word, but we do have a 2-hour full pack show. We do have to move some stuff on right now, and let me just first introduce you to some of our guests that we've got on the show today. You've just heard from Dr. David Remay, my resident sidekick and co-host and partner on this show. Let me introduce you to somebody who's making their first appearance on this show. Tim Bestbuds, how are we doing, Tim?
Fine. How are you, Kervin?
Oh, Tim, I'm as great as I can be, and just great to be amongst the company of what I refer to as legends. So, if you'd like to just give the audience a couple of minutes about who you are, what you do, and what you're here to talk about today, and then we'll get stuck into the nitty gritty.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to thank you and Dr. David for letting me come on the show, and I want to commend Alex Salazar and Justin Powers. I heard the last show of Justin Powers, and I spoke with Alex yesterday. They're both awesome, and I wish more cops would follow their lead and do the right thing, instead of what's going on right now.
Absolutely.
But as for me, I'm an activist. I've been an activist for about 17 years now. I'm a member of Anonymous, and I've been involved in Op Serena Shim. I'm involved in a lot of ops, Op Kendrick Johnson, a lot of cases of police brutality. I've dealt with a lot of things. That's pretty much what I do with all my time. I just try to get justice for people who can't get it for themselves, and that's what Anonymous is about. When all other venues and avenues have been exhausted, people come to us for justice, and we do our best to get it for them.
And it's a great work that some of you do, which has me following and supporting 100%. I have a lot of alliances and acquaintances within the Anonymous movement, and I'm pretty much kept up to date on most of the ops that are taking place and support them wholeheartedly. So we welcome you, Tim, onto this show. And the main area of expertise where you'll be speaking today is on the Kendrick Johnson. But where activism raises ugly, its beautiful head. In amongst all of these other things that we're discussing, please feel free to chomp in and give your opinions, because your opinion will matter. Next, let me just introduce another one of our dear friends. He's been on the show before, ex-police chief, but not of law enforcement, as Alex has already quite rightly pointed out, Justin Powers. How are you doing, Justin?
Good. How you guys doing today?
Well, looking forward to what you got to bring. Just,
yes, sir. Thank you for having me back on here, and Alex and David, and
glad to have you.
And Irvin, how you guys doing?
We're all good, Justin. We're just glad to have you on board, and looking forward to what you're going to bring, what you're going to contribute, and what you represent.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and finally, our final guest. We've had him several times, and we've also already had him on this month. We had him on the Antoinette Houston case, if you remember correctly, and what an awesome show that was. Still probably our most viewed show ever is the Antoinette Houston show, and we'll update you on that very shortly. But none other than ex-LA law enforcement officer Alex Salazar. How you doing, Alex?
Doing great, Kervin. I'm just so happy to be here again with you, Dr. Romay and Tim, and the people of Anonymous, who are the equalizers in this battle against police injustice. Between them and police officers that actually have a conscience, we can do something to change and to stop the killing. So I'm very excited here today to be with you guys and to just be totally in the raw to discuss these things as we need to.
Okay.
Hi, Alex.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for taking part in this show. Let me just give you a summary of why we've gone about doing this show. As you know, that this has been a month of Black History in America and Canada, and we wanted to bring together a group of strong shows that represented just the sheer negligence of duty and the fact that Black lives don't matter. We wanted to prove that beyond point with the shows that we put on this month. And why today's show? Today's show is titled Power and Justice. Or is it Power or Justice? Power versus Justice, whichever way you want to put it. But I spend time in meditation trying to think of what it is that I want to get out of the show and why we title it such a way. And for me, we're going to be talking a lot today about the difference between the badge and the gun. And it's important that we understand how these things tie up. The first show that we did at the beginning of the month was Antoinette Houston. Let me just summarize that very quickly for you. Antoinette Houston was a young lady. She had never dared to question authority. She had no issues with police or law enforcement. In fact, her words were she didn't believe that those kind of things happened to black people, and they didn't happen to anybody that was around her. So when she became a victim of police brutality of the most horrible kind, as Alex can testify to because he was part of that show and heard and seen the evidence that went with her case, it brought people to tears, even just on that very show, to witness what this woman had been brought up with, what her beliefs were, and how her life was absolutely turned upside down by just one negligent, off-duty cop who absolutely was brutal, not just brutal to her, but that wasn't what policing was meant to be in anybody's eyes. We followed that up with the Tamir Rice show. We had Greg Greer on the show on that particular occasion, Pastor Greg Greer. And Greg, in particular, has been an advocate for the Tamir Rice family. We heard about a young boy, 12 years old, playing with a gun in a park, and 2.3 seconds or so later was shot dead upon arrival. Somebody had contacted law enforcement and said it was a kid playing on the swings, and the person actually said twice, on two occasions, to the recipient on the 911 call that it's a kid and the gun's probably fake. We learnt then that information was never passed on to the attending officers, who shot Tamir Rice dead within seconds of them arriving on the scene. And we followed that up with the Mario Woods execution, and we had the legendary activist Cephas Johnson on last week, who spoke on behalf of Mario Woods and activism and the role that the police played in executing a man where we were able to identify the fact that the police had no understanding or basic training in mental health related issues. Otherwise, somebody would have been able to communicate with this young man who the autopsy showed was high on methamphetamine at the time, and probably could have brought about an arrest if one was needed, instead of the loss of another life. And so here we are. At the end of this show, somewhere during this show, we're going to be talking about another young man, Kendrick Johnson, and we're going to go into that in greater detail on next week's show with Jacqueline Johnson. And we're going to be talking about Kendrick Johnson, a young gentleman who apparently died wrapped up inside of a gym mat, looking for a shoe. I've got some very important questions that I want to ask on that case. And we're going to look at how all of these particular cases tie together. We're not just talking about Black Lives Matter. Lives matter. But Black lives wouldn't have to matter. There wouldn't have to be a Black Lives Matter if Black lives actually mattered to those that have the power. And some people just don't get it. When you speak to people across the world, David already said it in his opening, a lot of people don't even believe that racism exists, you know. It might not in their little quarter, but they actually haven't got to deal with the aftermath of racism or the consequences of it most of the time. And when you're looking at all of these cases, the one thing that links them all together, they were all either brutalized or their lives were taken at the hands from the very people that we're supposed to trust. Those that we were raised to trust. Antoinette hit the nail on the head. She was brought up by a good family. She was brought up with good morals and principles. She was brought up to respect authority, respect the law. That's what she was brought up with, high levels of morals and principles. And our parents brought us up to understand that, you know, we have to side on right. We have to live right. We have to do what's right. And law enforcement was always meant to be there to engage what was right. And what we're seeing now is our young men and women murdered and brutalized on the streets. And today, we want to ask a very important question through our prized guests who are here today. Is it power or is it justice? Justice is something that is administered as a form of consequence for actions taken that are not right, illegal. You steal, you rob, you hurt, you kill, you rape, you molest, you abuse. You do something that's wrong. Justice is meant to come in and serve consequence. Power, in my opinion, is where an officer who forsakes the honor of the badge and reaches for his gun first, and another life is lost. Today, we're going to look at those issues and power in policing, and how these stories connect with one another. And the first person that I want to go to on this particular question, especially as he was there on the first show, is Alex. How are you doing, Alex? Hi, Alex.
Doing good, thank you, Kervin. Doing good.
Hi, Alex.
Just going back
Hi.
to the Antoinette case in particular, what stuck out for you the most out of that story with Antoinette Houston?
Well, like most people who have never had a confrontation with the police, they're kind of in denial, and they don't ever think that anything can happen to them. That is until they meet that one power tripping, police officer that if you don't move or do what they say immediately, then it can become a case of contempt of cop. And so that's precisely what sticks out in my mind here. Once again, this woman's coming home from a funeral. It's 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning. She wants to get a donut. She's hungry. She wants to go to bed, and she slightly parked her car. And here's this guy who's off duty who just decides to play police officer. And, solely because of the color of her skin, because she's black, does he decide to target her? And so for me, that's what sticks out here, that, we're still a long, ways from accepting, that racism is a big part of our country. And we continue to deal with it day in and day out with all kinds of crazy examples. You mentioned in the beginning, the president, Dr. Romay, all these issues that he's having. And this is a demon that has come out to the surface, and I'm glad that we're about this now.
Yeah. Tim, can I just bring you in a second? As much as that might not be your case in point, but I do know Anonymous have had a lot to do with supporting the Tamir Rice movement and justice for Tamir Rice. What strikes you as the most significant thing to come out of either the death, the investigation, or even more importantly, the non-indictment of the officers that killed him? What's the most significant thing to come out for you in that story?
That story is so traumatic. Oh my God, I cried when I first saw the video. It still horrifies me. I mean, it was like a drive-by shooting, basically. And for those cops to get off after that video, there definitely needs to be changes made. I mean, he was a kid playing with a toy gun, and I did a video with with Deveron Wilborn's parents a while back at Greens, and we talked about how when officers come across a white person with a gun, they'll give them almost any time they need to talk them down, to take the gun from them. They'll stand around. It's like not a threat. But even a black child with a toy gun, immediately shot. No, stop, freeze, put the gun down. It's horrible. That's the most blatantly racist thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's horrible.
The funniest thing about that, one of the things that we were able to put together when we did that show with Greg and on the Tamir Rice, we was able to parallel the Tamir Rice case with the John Crawford. Different ages, different states, different circumstances, but both of them was actually had a non-lethal weapon in their hand when they were both gunned down by officers that turned up and shot them both dead within 2 to 3 seconds of arrival. No assessment, no communication, no attempt to interact with the individual in order to ascertain whether or not they were at risk to themselves or another, which I would have imagined when I turned to you, Justin. Surely that should always be the point to call on when retaliating, when reacting as an officer. Surely it's a case of when you pull that gun and you're about to shoot somebody, surely the issue has to be, is there an element of either risk to yourself or another? Is that not the case?
Well, here's the thing: is hindsight's 20/20. All right. Now I understand that the child got shot. Hindsight's 20/20. But as being a responding officer to a possible gun situation, you always go in extra alert because, of course, you want to come home alive every night. But when you go in there, if the child's not pointing a gun at you, you need to use officer's discretion. Now, just going in there and shooting somebody for no valid reason, that's not an excuse. I wasn't there. I didn't see the video per se. In my opinion, when you go up to a situation like that, you observe your situation. You have to make a split-second decision on how you're going to react to it. If it's a child and he has a gun, if the gun's just pointed down and he's not hostile towards me, of course I'm not going to shoot the child immediately or in any way shoot the child. But again, I want to come home at night. I would tell the child to drop the weapon, of course, and hopefully it would end in a peaceful situation. But this goes back to an officer has to use his brain.
Okay, I get that, but it's a bit unfair of me to put that on you that way. So let me clarify this for you a little bit. And anybody can step in and correct me if I'm wrong at any point whatsoever. When the police were called out, they were called out because Tamir Rice was playing in the park with a toy gun. When the police arrived on the scene, Tamir Rice did not have the gun in his hand. When Tamir Rice was shot dead, there was no gun in his hand. So at that point in time, there was absolutely no reason to fear for their lives.
Yes, I agree that you are correct on that. The information should have been put out to the officers. The officers should have had that information prior
irrespective of whether they had the information or not. The point I'm trying to make, Justin, without trying to put you on the spot, because again, you're an ex-police chief, and it almost makes it sound like I'm targeting you, and I'm not, because you're a friend of the show. The point I'm trying to make is this: when those police officers arrived with their judgments, there was no gun in his hand, so there was no reason for them to either draw their weapon or fire their gun. There was none. If he still had to talk, I understand the argument that the police still wants to come home safe. He still wants to come home alive. So if he arrives on the scene and somebody's got a gun in their hand and they can't identify whether it's real or not, then hey, okay, we hold our hands up. We made a mistake. We thought the gun was real, but there was no gun in his hand. And if there was no gun in his hand, then surely there was no reason for the officers to draw their weapons and fire it without conversation.
I agree, and I'll give you a situation. I was working, and I got a call of a suicide or a possible suicide that was taking place. The wife of the husband called me. She said he was intoxicated, that he had a .357 revolver. The dispatch kept saying, "Don't go in the house, don't go in the house." I knew the individual. I went in the house. I never withdrew my weapon from my holster. I walked in. I observed the weapon sitting on the table. I asked him, talked him down basically, told him, his life is more valuable. Think about your children. And then I just politely asked him, "Hey, can I grab that gun from you?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I took the gun off of him and I secured him, and then we went and got him help. But again, you have to go back to the officer should have never fired at this child if the child never had the weapon. And it was just like this situation. This weapon was in this man's arm's reach, but you have to be able to be a good judge of the situation as a police officer. And your training experience has a lot to do with that.
And I would hope that they've been given the best of training. Now, just before we go into today's real segment, I just wanted to round up and summarize on the cases that we've done for this month before I draw on the fact that what we believe is what ties all of these shows together is that police, when you look at power or justice, all of these cases were met with power. Not just there's no justice in any of the lives or the attacks or the brutality that was administered to Antoinette in particular. But all of these cases have one thing in common. There was no justice, just power. And right after this this Black History moment, sting that I'm about to give you, we're going to talk about the difference between power and justice. So bear with me.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
Hi, it's your friend Ronnie Canada here to ask you an important question about Black history. Did you know? Hi, it's your friend Ronnie Canada here to ask you an important question about Black history. Did you know? Did you know that the Black Panthers helped to begin some of the most influential social services still in use today? Fred Hampton, a member of the Black Panthers in Chicago, was integral in bringing about the Women, Infants, and Children Food Assistance Program, commonly known as WIC, and free breakfast programs for children. In the turmoil of the civil rights movement, many worked on bringing programs that would feed the hungry and help families who were unable to get any assistance. Most people today remember only the most radical side of groups such as the Black Panthers. But without the work of Hampton and others like him, many people today would still find themselves hungry and in need of other basic human services. If you didn't know, now you know.
Well, the Black Panther movement was probably One of the first things that we heard about was either the Black Panther or the Black Power movement, as it was called here over in the UK. But yeah, they represented, and we are glad that they are still about. And I'm going to bring in Dr. David Romay just for 1 minute, because there's just one thing that I forgot to mention when I was doing my roundup, and Dr. David is going to just drop that in there right now. Go on, David.
Oh, Kervin, you could have said it probably better. You know, we were the first on Issues Today to break the story of a young African-American woman who was driving from Chicago to Texas to take a new job at Texas A&M University at Prairie View, which is the primary school for minority students, since Texas A&M in College Station only has about 1% black students. They keep the blacks in a separate campus. Of course, we don't have segregation and no racism exists. Well, a police officer in the racist town nearby, Prairie View, came and stopped her for simply putting on a turn signal. She put on her turn signal so the policeman could pass her on the highway. He pulled her over. She asked him why. He told her to put out her cigarette. She refused to put out her cigarette. He dragged her out of the car. He beat the living hell out of her. He jammed her head into the sidewalk near the highway. He arrested her, put her in jail. She told him that she was on antidepressants. This humiliation, this lack of dignity, this personal and physical assault upon her body led her to die in the jail cell. Now, we don't know if she hanged herself, as they say, or if they hanged her. We don't know. We know lynching is a very common thing. That is the very same neighborhood where a man under George W. Bush's governorship of that state dragged a human being in Jasper, Texas, behind his truck until his head fell off. And then Bush wouldn't pass the Civil Rights Act. So that was what happened to Sandra. We pray for her. We pray for her family. And we cannot forget that this show brought that forth, and 3 days after we did it, the entire world erupted with indignation over that inhumanity to Miss Sandra Bland.
Amen to that. And again, I just want to give thanks to the people that allow me to do this show, World Jam Global Radio in particular, who allow me to venture in on things that most other media networks don't get allowed to do. We were able to break that Sandra Bland story right from the get-go, before everybody else did, as David says. And it's not about competitions of who did it first. I think what I loved about what we did was the openness in which we did it and the openness in which we do what we do. Now, let's just swiftly move on to today's show. I do believe it would have been Sandra's birthday last week, and we did mention that in last week's show. So, our hearts and our prayers go out to her family, who are still mourning and still have no justice. And we will continue to fight for the lives of those as Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, John Crawford, Kelly Thomas, and all the others that are lining up in the morgues, in the graveyards, murdered by police brutality. And today we ask the important question: is it power or is it justice? Now, before we ask some important questions that you guys are eager to answer, let me summarize what I mean by this. When I was growing up, the law was something that you respected, just as Antoinette Houston said in the first show of this month. And to me, the badge represented honor. People who carried a badge, whether if you're a police officer, a fireman, if you was an emergency service operator, it wasn't about prestige. It wasn't a class status. It was an honor and a privilege to serve your community, to serve your state. The respect that went with that was second to none. Back in the day, only priests would get the type of respect that local law enforcement officers in the community would get. And so therefore the badge represented something of honor. And for me, when a policeman arrived at a scene, the first thing that he does, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex and Justin, you're there, is that you need to identify yourself. Right. For example, yes. When I'm working in the homelessness services in the Salvation Army, if I arrive, and I'm a first aider, by the way, right? So if I arrive at a scene and there's an injured person on the floor, I can't just go and start treating that person. Right, the law states that I've got to identify myself as a first aider. Now, I have a first aider certificate, a card in my wallet that I could pull out to produce if somebody has a problem with me touching the person laying on the floor who is injured. But the first thing that I must do is identify myself. So that's the first area of honor and respect, because if a police officer arrives on the scene and identifies himself, his badge is what he needs. That's how you identify yourself. And that badge carries a weight of respect, right? So when you arrive on the scene and you produce that badge to identify yourself as a law enforcement officer, anybody and everybody around is supposed to respect that badge and honor the work that you're supposed to do. That's the difference, or that's not the difference, that's one angle. Here's the other angle. Nowadays, what you actually have is officers who turn up, and the first things that they do is that they have their hand on their gun, either drawn or about to draw. So therefore, there is a difference in how they identify themselves, whether you are identifying yourself with honor or you are identifying yourself with fear. I believe that the problem that we have systematically in the country, in America today, is that most officers go about identifying themselves with fear. And when you try to identify yourself with fear, fear will be met by fear. And so therefore, you've got people who are retaliating. And I'm not talking, listen to me very carefully. I need to be clear about this. I'm not talking about gangbangers. I'm not talking about murderers. I'm not talking about drug dealers and pimps and people who break the law, who carry guns because they want to protect the interest of their criminal way of living. That's not what I'm talking about. Because I think if that's what we were talking about here, and that's all we were talking about, most of us probably wouldn't be sat here as passionate as we are, irrespective of the colour of skin of the individual. The reason why there is such an outcry, there's such an outpouring of anger, is the numerous amount of innocent people not involved in a criminal act whose lives are cut primarily short because an officer chooses to arrive and identify himself with his gun rather than his badge. Now, we're looking at power or justice. So let me just go to Alex first.
Curvin, I just wanted to say something. I'm glad you picked me here. First of all, I want to say what you just said is probably one of the most profound and brilliant things that has been said on your show here with respect to me being on it and actually listening to you here, because you centered on something very key here. And this is the aspect of fear within the police officer. Just this past week, I was speaking to a couple of my colleagues, one of them, Kevin Murphy in the county of Montgomery, Alabama. He's the one who became famous for apologizing to John Lewis for the butt kicking that they gave him back in 1965 as they were crossing over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And one of the things that he's doing that our coalition, the NCLOJ and other officers from across the country are doing is we're getting together to talk about this aspect of fear. And he really has a project going on where they're actually talking about specifically, we'll go back to Tamir Rice here, on why was Tamir Rice killed in under 2 seconds? What was it that caused this officer to come out and just basically execute him? And so these are the questions that are being raised that the police unions themselves and officers, they're not really talking about this. But you have people who are visionaries and individuals who can think out of the box, like Chief Murphy, who was able to apologize to John Lewis and say, hey, we have a problem here with racism. But more so than that, what he's doing is he's taking this to a higher level to talk about what causes these officers to have an itchy trigger finger. And so there's research with that. And along with that, too, we go into the topic of mindfulness, in which another police officer, this time in Oregon, I forget the officer's name, but anyhow, he's talking about mindfulness. That is being in the moment. And I know it sounds kind of Zen-like and maybe you need to smoke a doobie or whatever to get into that state of mind in this crazy world. But, what they're starting to talk about here is that these officers need to slow down because the mind is going too quick. And so this is just one of the issues here that we're looking here for the future of policing and being able to control that fear. And in fact, they're calling it fear control. So I just wanted to add that to you and commend you for bringing that up, as this is something that we're trying to work on internally, because this isn't going to come from the police themselves. We need to have the people involved because these guys think that they're perfect. They're thinking that, oh, yeah, we're not scared. We're macho, bad cops. And unfortunately, we need to get rid of that stereotype.
That then explains part of it. But the question that follows that for me, for you, Alex, is so what does it feel like to wear the uniform? For you, I mean, you wore the uniform. What does it feel like to wear that uniform? What did it feel like for you?
Well, for me, I was very proud initially. I felt being in the military, having been in the Air Force, I had a very good assignment. I provided securities for Air Force One during the presidency of Ronald Reagan. I was essentially a clone, what we call a Theo Juan here for that time period in doing what the government told me to do. And so in becoming a cop, here I was, someone that's now being trusted with the law to kind of think and to decide, whether I'm going to ruin this person's life or whether I'm going to give them a chance. And there were many times, where I ran into people and they spoke to me well when I pulled them over, say they were speeding, and they're like, hey, yeah, I know I was speeding, I'm sorry. And I'd let them go. And when I had someone that tried to hustle me and just try to play a game, well, it was a different story, of course. But overall, for me, I loved wearing that uniform and I liked serving the people. However, that changed for me within time. Within 2 years, as if anyone knows my story, and if they don't, they can go to renegadepopo.com to learn a little bit about me, is that I got beaten up severely and almost left for dead on the streets of Los Angeles 2 years into my policing career. And basically, I was beat up, I was ran over, and the after effects of that against gangbangers in particular really affected me. And so this is not about my story here, but like I said, that's what I felt anyhow when I became a police officer.
Justin, so therefore, we're looking at power at the moment. So how much power does a policeman have? How much power does he feel he has? And how much power should he have?
A police officer, majority of the time, I'm just going to speak for myself. When I first became a police officer, it wasn't about power. It was about pride. I was kind of like Alex. The badge is just a piece of tin, and it really matters who the person is underneath the uniform. But a police officer does have a lot of power. And a lot of them, you were talking about the Rice situation earlier, about the training, that they should have the training. And Alex can agree with me. A lot of these guys just go through the academy, and they are taught, the basic civil rights, basic U.S. Constitution, and they're sent on the street. So everything they learned in the academy, they're told as soon as they hit the street, forget it, because you're going to learn from your training officer how to be a police officer. Yep. A lot of that is, a lot of them are there is some that are very prideful as well, that it's not just about the pride of wearing a uniform. They are, it is a power trip to them. I used to have an old saying, I used to say that a lot of times those kids that used to get picked on in the playground end up being the cops so they can pick on the people that picked on them. They're the bullies now. I was never that way, but there is a lot of law enforcement officers that are that way, and I know Alex can agree with that as well. You could tell they were the ones that were picked on when they were kids, so they have that power trip about them as well. Is that taught? It's not taught. I think that is something that is taught from a young age and brought up as an individual person. There is some police officers that I do agree that it's power over justice, and then there's some that I believe is justice over power.
I'm glad you said that, Justin. I'm going to quip in here with something very, very, very quickly.
And then there's also that emanates from a long, long time ago, and it starts back with
your signal is very bad, Alex. You're coming across very robotic.
I'm sorry. Okay, hold on a second. Sit in my car. Can you hear me now better?
There's just a robotic sound. It's very distorted.
Yeah. Hang
on a minute. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut you out and I'm going to call you back in, okay? Just bear with me. Just 1 second. Let me just call Alex back in because that sound was... That's going to be conducive to us, actually. I just wanted to say this.
I would like... wait, Kerwin. I'd like to nominate that last few seconds for the Oscar Award for the best interview ever. I love that. Boy, that was pinging off the wall.
Yeah,
it's like Star Wars or something.
Yeah, that was. We are trying to reconnect him. I think the problem is that he's losing his signal, his connection where he is. But I just want to say this. I'm glad that you kind of said that because one of the things that we grew up believing and witnessing ourselves here in the UK, was the amount of people that felt that they had been discriminated against or bullied, white kids in the playgrounds of schools, who were very quick to go and join the police cadets, and then venture out onto the streets with this new bold, boastful approach. Now, I had an experience coming on a train from London to Wales once, and it was a raw recruit, a new cadet, and he'd obviously just come back from training. And he really tried to, not knowing who I was or anything about me, tried to put it on me on a journey. He was very intimidating, and I could see that he had all of this stuff with him, and you could tell that it was police cadets uniform and stuff like that. And I was a bit suspicious and a bit apprehensive as to how I was going to deal with it. But he continued to make some really racist jibes at me, and said some stuff that was very hurtful. And but he didn't know me, and back in them days, I was a very naughty man. So he left the train station in Wales, and he was obviously waiting for a lift, and went into the bar that's next door to the train station to sit, and the bar was very empty. There was a shop across the road, and I went into it, and I bought myself a balaclava, and I came back, and I dragged him out of the bar. I dragged him into the toilets, and I beat the crap out of him. And the bottom line is, I'm not really sure what took place with him thereafter, but there are some times where we witness that these young cadets who go into the forces because they want to try and exert some kind of intimidatory behavior over another. And unfortunately, they're going to come across certain people that won't take it, and that's what's happening now, where people are beginning to stand up against the power, because we want justice. We want justice returned, irrespective of whether a guy was bullied or not. Surely, once he goes through that, the training should be able to pick out any flaws. The training should be able to pick out any mental adjustments that need to be made. The vocabulary and his line of thinking needs to be challenged and questioned. But how they still able to get through and exercise that form of racism whilst wearing the uniform and carrying that badge still astounds me. Are you back, Alex?
I am, yes.
Okay, sorry, we got you back, and now we can hear you.
Great. You know, it's like that always happens to me when we get on a roll.
Yeah, it does.
What's that?
Yeah, you got the platform back again. Come back in with what you was about to say then.
Okay. Well, you know, I always like to talk about that. I didn't go in to become a thug or to frame people, to beat people, to kill people, or to hurt people when I became a police officer. When I got into that incident, I chose not to use deadly force because I didn't want to kill anyone. However, in the long run, it ended up messing me up. And instead of help for PTSD, I ended up becoming part of the subculture where there were numerous officers who were experiencing severe trauma. Some of these officers were involved with the Biggie Smalls, Tupac killings, of where police officers had been present during the time where these two big rap stars had been killed. And so they never talked about these things, about these issues that still continue to pervade law enforcement. And so what we're trying to do is talk about this more and to have this dialogue without dealing with all the psychobabble that they try to bring into it, you know. But it's an exciting time here to have these discussions, because if we don't, we're going to end up having a revolution. People are just tired of these excuses. We cannot continue to ignore that white supremacy is the problem here behind this whole thing. I'm glad to have someone like Justin, who's in the thick of it in the country of Tennessee, where the state that killed Martin Luther King with that guy. You know, I mean, it's pretty crazy. James Earl Ray, you know.
Yeah, and then also, I guess you heard today that Tennessee has just adopted a new state gun, and this gun has the power to take down a commercial aircraft carrier flying at 10,000 feet.
Wow!
Imagine
what it's going to do. Imagine what it's going to do to a human being.
Well, that's a Second Amendment right, according to them. You see.
Wow. Listen, let me just ask Tim a question here. Just before we move on to another segment, how does the way that the police carry out their duties in this mentality of power. How does that differentiate from a normal citizen, a criminal, or a vigilante walking around the streets? Are they any different? Should they be treated any different?
Well, they're state sponsored for one. Most gangs aren't state sponsored.
Is that Justin? Is that Justin speaking?
No, that's Tim.
Tim. Oh, that was very good, Tim. So they're state sponsored. They're paid for by the government. They have government issued ammunition, and they're basically immune from any responsibility for their thug-like activities. Is that what you're saying?
That's what he's saying. And the bottom line is there any difference between them and the vigilante and the criminal?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, in my mind, not really, other than the fact that my taxes pay for their crimes and my taxes don't pay for other people's crimes. But I don't see a difference. Some people would say that there is a difference, but in my opinion, I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it's like we have another gang in LA that supersedes all the other gangs, and my tax dollars and other people who work hard have to pay to be harassed by these thugs.
It's almost like a super mafia, right? The difference is that they never run out of ammunition, and they have a continual flow of backup, right?
Oh, they're exactly like a mafia from my experiences. I mean, I've dealt with cases where police have taken out witnesses, and there was a guy who called it was in Pomona. He I can't remember his name right now, sorry, but he called the police at a party. There was a fight. The police came and ended up beating him and tasing him and attacking him. He reported the police, and he had a lawsuit filed against the police department. And a few months later, he's sitting in his car with his girlfriend, and the police come and kill him and say he had a gun. And there was no evidence of anything, and those cops were let off as well. It was just retaliation, and they do this a lot. I mean, you could look through all the. I mean, as an
retaliation has always been a really big thing, and we've had people silenced, and that's what happened to Dr. King. It's what happened to Ruben Salazar out here. But we don't need to be afraid of that anymore, because it can't kill us all. Okay, this stuff is out in the open nowadays, and with the recent arrest this last month of Sheriff Lee Baca, all this stuff is being exposed. The head 5-star general. The only 5-star chief in the country is the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department sheriff. And here he is, all these fabrications. I mean, even trying to mess with the FBI. I'm not going to say F with the FBI, but they did. And they got caught, and they, are being sentenced now. And every day we're hearing all these instances of these police officers being arrested. The issue here, what we're trying to fight with, is the culture. And the culture has been long-standing. It's very highly ingrained. We're seeing it in these ugly debates that are going on between the Republicans. I mean, it's gotten downright really dirty. And how much lower can things go here? But you're dealing with white supremacy. Yes? Go ahead.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, brother. Go on, Justin.
I've been trying to add something. I can't get a hold of anybody. One of the issues too, Alex, and you'll agree with me. A lot of the issues is with the police force, but a lot of the issue is also with the district attorneys and the judges.
Yep.
They're just as bad, if not worse.
Worse.
I think they're personally worse. Around here they are. The district attorney in Tennessee, he controls the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, and they're the ones over the city police officers, the local police officers, and the state police officers. They're the ones that control the investigation. So if the DA is like the Gestapo to me, if the DA wants somebody investigated, he just tells them to go investigate them. And that's too much. That's too much authority with no oversight.
Justin, Justin, is that you speaking?
Yes, that's correct.
This is David. Carver, let me jump in here. I have said for over a year on this show that the primary problem with justice in the United States of America is the overwhelming discretion given to prosecutors who use that discretion in the most damaging way possible to please their masters, to please the money, to protect the influential, to punish the innocent, and to silence those who want to hold them accountable. And until the district attorneys are completely separated from grand juries, they shouldn't be in the same building, they shouldn't be in the same neighborhood. They should come and report like a clerk. But these district attorneys can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, a cockroach, anybody they want, and they can get them to ignore I don't care if you go out and shoot 20 people, they can have you ignored. Not one Wall Street banker has been indicted. And look at this case I brought up today in Suffolk County, New York. 11 policemen conspired with the chief of police to beat the living hell out of this boy because he embarrassed the chief by calling him a pornographer. Why is that district attorney working today? Why isn't that district attorney relieved of duty? And until we can make district attorneys accountable to a superior instead of to the, quote, elected official, the elected voter, the voters elect them. No one can touch them. It's ridiculous.
We have a district attorney here in 25th that was actually charged with prosecutional misconduct. Not charged, but through the Board of Professional Responsibility, nothing was done. Now, if that was a regular person that was charged with a crime, that goes towards his bar association. But if he was charged with a regular crime, they'd be put in jail.
Absolutely.
There is absolutely no accountability. And the problem I see, too,
and they protect
I'm not trying to take up too much time. The problem I see as well is the judges and the DAs work together. A judge, you're supposed to be an equal scale of justice. A judge.
A referee.
Yes, and the judge, even in general sessions courts, like I go down to 201 Poplar, which is Memphis, Shelby County, Memphis Police Department. I go down there and I sit in court, and it's all I'm sorry, there is white people that live in Memphis. I'm sorry, there is. But there's white people that live in Memphis,
honestly.
And there is nothing but African Americans in all the drug courts. You can't tell me white people don't commit crimes, first of all. Second off is the judges and DAs work together. They communicate together. And whatever the DA usually says, the judge agrees with. Where is the scales of justice? Where do they equalize?
That actually comes on to that. Hang on a minute, David. That comes on to the next point, which is absolutely pertinent right now. And we're talking about, that this doesn't seem to be a battle of justice. This seems to be a battle of power. And therefore, you have...
But it affects justice.
Yeah, one second. You have somebody, for example, on the ground, like Alex when he was an ex-law enforcement officer, right? You see a scene taking place, right? You've gathered all the evidence, right? So you go to your chief of police, now that's Justin, and you say, right, this is the evidence I've gathered for the case. This is the guy that I think that we really need to be arresting because he's the guy that, did something wrong. And your chief of police, Justin, says, right, well, great work, Alex. I think that's really, all of that information is correct. I can see it's sound and just. Go ahead. I'll get the arrest warrants. You go out and arrest him, and we're going to have a trial going on here. And then Justin now, all of a sudden, Justin gets a phone call or a visit, right? And says, I need you to hang on for that for a minute. I don't want you prosecuting that guy. I can't actually tell you why, but you're not going to prosecute that guy. We're not going to go any further. Right. And now this is where we refer to the bully getting bullied, right?
Kervin,
absolutely.
Yeah,
when I exposed the truth about the officers falsifying affidavits, I went to the circuit court judge. I went to the district attorney's office first. And you know what I was told?
Go on.
You're lying. You're not telling the truth. Play along. And I wouldn't play along with them. And I was a chief of police.
Alex.
And that same judge also convicted an individual knowing he had that information when he should have withdrew himself from the court.
And that goes back to one second, David, 1 second, please, just 1 second. Alex, that actually ties in with what you've been doing through the whistleblowers, etc., and that union. How difficult is it for an officer to actually bring in evidence against another officer that is corrupt, planting evidence, and falsely arresting people? How difficult is it to bring a case like that forward?
Man, you're set up for being called a rat immediately, to being killed. We saw what happened with Serpico many years ago. Recently, the names Joe Crystal and many other officers that are coming forward now and taking the chance. They're tired of seeing the profession being torn down. Yet, it's a profession of hypocrisy, and it has been a hypocrisy. It's never acknowledged that Black Lives Matter. That human life, can exist in all shapes and forms and different colors and what have you. And this is, the meltdown of everything that is happening. And so for me, I kind of look at it now that, we need to deal with this really bad mentality, this Trump way of thinking. I mean, this stuff is getting me sick here. And this is one of the reasons I've gotten away from social media pretty much completely because there's so much toxic energy that's going on out there. And so we need to talk about these things in a very calm light. We need to see them for what they are, yet, respond accordingly, because there's a lot of paranoia out there right now with people who are talking about these things. And there's also a big division, as we know, within the country, in which for the first time our country is dealing with its ugly past, its history, the Confederacy flag being taken down, a person like Walter Scott, who was shot in the back, and being caught on tape as this officer's planning a taser. This thing has come out to the surface for what it is. We need to quit playing games and finally just deal with these issues of these judges being in collusion with these prosecutors.
Let me add in, Alex, on this judges issue, because this is very important. It's not only a matter of prosecutors and judges working together. Judges who would go against a prosecutor may very well find themselves or family members brought before a grand jury themselves, taken out of the bench. Prosecutors go to state meetings and have judges removed from office for ethical violations. Prosecutors threaten judges every single day. And in addition to that, and this is really important, a policeman with a DA can go to almost any judge in any jurisdiction of this country and get a search warrant issued in about 1 second. And these judges are so compliant, so non-attentive to the constitutional requirement for absolute proof before a search warrant is issued into your private home, a fundamental aspect of the U.S. Constitution, that they are absolutely not only negligent, but criminally responsible for violations of fundamental British and American rights guaranteed to us in the Constitution. These judges, let me make it very clear, are nothing more than patsy rubber stamps for corrupt prosecutors.
In this fight for power, right? I'm coming to you now, Justin. In this, and Tim, I know there's a question that you've got outstanding. I've got it up on the screen in front of me. I'll ask Alex very shortly. Bear with us. But Justin, in this battle for power, where the bullies get bullied, answer me this question. Speaking as a former chief of police, what does it feel like, first, when the state supersedes the local authority? I want you to answer me this. Does it undermine the work of law enforcement and management of police? Does it render local law enforcement organizations pointless? Does it inflame existing animosities between agencies and their communities? How does it affect cooperation between multiple levels of agencies? And does it predispose LEOs to be less caring, law enforcement officers, to be less caring or invested in the process of justice?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I personally think I wrote a paper. I was talking to your producer earlier. I wrote a paper for one of my master level classes on mutual aid agreements. A lot of cities go through mutual aid agreements, but since 9/11, the United States adopted the Department of Homeland Security Act of 2002, and they've also in 1997. They developed the Department of Defense 1033 program, and that's where the government's giving military equipment to civilian law enforcement, like we've seen in Ferguson, Missouri. And I think with the overreach of all the government authority, it's really affecting policing, the modern policing world. And when you have the state overreaching its powers, it really renders the local law enforcement useless. When the state goes in there and a DA shuts you down, I mean, it's a cumulative process of things. Then the federal government comes down. I believe that the states overreach their powers way too much. I mean, there's a reason why we don't have a unitarian form of government. We have a federal government. There's a reason why we got away from the Articles of the Confederation, the confederation of the government. That's why we have a federal government where it's a mixture of the Unitarian and the Confederation, But I believe that there's just too much power. There's too much power within the government right now that's I think it's an overreach into the locals.
If every decision you make can be overwritten, does it really matter any longer what you do or how you treat people or cases? Is it any wonder why police officers are not really bothered about the truth anymore, that they can just go out there and pick up whatever person that they can pick up and plant evidence and falsify arrests and just treat in the most inhumane way individuals who are not acting in a criminal way? Is it any wonder why police officers, law enforcement officers are making up rules and laws as they go along? Is it any wonder why innocent people are being sent to jail? Is it any wonder why people are being affronted and assaulted and abused and brutalized just by failing to signal in the right direction while driving a motor car on their way to an interview? Is it any wonder how a child of 12 years old can be shot dead while playing in a park? If police, law enforcement officers are not made to uphold the honor that comes with carrying the badge, instead of being part of the battle for power that exists between the higher echelons of state and government. Because that's
my opinion. My opinion is this, though, Kervin. Places like Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, where Alex came from, you have an internal affairs division that investigates police wrongdoings. Just like Nashville Police Department has it, Memphis Police Department has it. But majority of your local jurisdictions where there's 10 officers, there is no oversight. There is zero oversight. Every time I went to my district attorney when I was a chief of police, and even when I was a sergeant and a lieutenant, I would always say, we need to develop an internal affairs organization that investigates corrupt law enforcement. And I was always shot down. Well, that's why we have the TBI. The TBI only gets called when an incident occurs. There needs to be a proactive approach to hold these officers accountable. And just like there is a proactive approach in Los Angeles and in Nashville, etc. But there is no proactive approach with these local agencies.
Yeah. One quick question to Alex, and then I've got another question for Alex, all right? Tim wanted to ask this question. Can we ask you, Alex, about cops returning from military? Because it seems to me that they view us as insurgents, not citizens. And also police unions are a huge problem. Can you take that on?
Okay, well, that's a two-question thing here. But yes, definitely the soldiers coming back are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. They've seen some really bad things in terms of decapitations and human mutilation, the bodies of effective bombs and things like that. They themselves might have lost a partner. And so here they are now, coming on the streets and going into some of the barrios and ghettos and basically seeing black and brown folk, as animals and having flashbacks. And so you've seen these cases here time and time and again. I myself personally working on some of these cases where this case, this little boy, 13 years old, shot in under 10 seconds, just going to go play with his kids. And yet this area that they were played in was known as a kid area. And so this mentality, once again, goes back to that it's a and a way of thinking, advocate to bring and to draw attention. I know that there's good police officers that are good, yet that they're because they know who exactly is committing the crimes. And although they might not be out there planting drugs or they're that nice cop that you think on the street or whatever, they know who's doing things. And that's what we need to deal with is some of these officers who are emotionally unstable and others that are just plain sociopathic killers.
Yeah, thank you for answering that and being honest. And I hope that answered the question for you, Tim. I just want to go back to the question that I wanted to ask you, which was following from what I just asked Justin, right? So, as a law enforcement officer, how would it feel, right, if, for example, if you fell under your management, or if your decisions were being overturned because your superior was being restricted in what he was enabling you to do. In other words, the same thing, what happens when a bully gets bullied? What happens when a higher authority takes power from the police? What happens when you've gone out and you're carrying out an investigation and you're hot on the trail of the culprit? You know who the guy is going to be. Like, you already know. All you're waiting is for the order from your superior that you can go and do this. And all of a sudden now he tells you that you got to hang fire, not because he doesn't agree with you or believe you, but because he's having his strings pulled from somewhere else. How does that feel as a police officer? Hi, Alex.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, how does that feel if you're the officer in an investigation and you get pulled by your chief who says, well, I can't let you go after him anymore because I've been told that we can't touch him. How does that feel?
Well, it feels really bad because you're being judged on your decision making, that you're trying to do the right thing. Yet here you have someone that's making it personal and basically perverting the law, perverting justice, and this is where retaliation takes place.
Okay, listen, I want to just move this very quickly, and David, let me just come to you very quickly. What role does the media play in influencing who has power and what outcomes may be likely to occur in the justice system?
There's no doubt that local media support the establishment. They work with the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce represents the local newspaper, the media, the businesses, the banks, the auto dealers, the real estate people. The two biggest advertisers in all local newspapers are real estate brokers and grocery stores, and the third is auto dealers. None of those three are ever investigated for anything in America. They can sell a lemon car, salmonella-infested food that kills people, and they can sell you a house that'll collapse on you. They're never investigated because they buy the most advertisement in local media. And the local media is supported by the local Chamber of Commerce. And they rely upon the police to sell their drugs for their bankers, to protect their criminals from prosecution. And they vote for the DA, elect the DA, and the DA never, ever gets bad publicity. I have never seen a local newspaper in a death penalty state, question a district attorney about his choice to seek a death penalty for a black person who committed a crime that was far less terrible than a white person who committed a crime that was far, far more terrible. And the media works with the DA, works with the police. They suppress those people like Alex and others who go out there and fight against them. They support the establishment, and they are nothing more than the glue that entirely holds the corrupt system together. Now, I hope I answered.
You did. Tim, I'm going to go off key here. I'm going to go offline. And
Does somebody disagree with that? Does somebody disagree with that?
Nope, there's no disagreements, David. But Tim, are you there? Hi, Tim?
Yes, hello.
Okay. Here we go. We're talking about people power. Kendrick Johnson. This is a case that's close to your heart. You've been involved with that movement for some time. Bearing in mind, we've just talked about some of the other cases, such as Mario Woods, Tamir Rice. How does Kendrick Johnson's case fit in with all of this?
Because it's all based on white supremacy.
Okay.
Oh yes.
And the police. The police. It's pretty blatant. It was a cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
It happened 3 years ago. I believe it was January 11th, 2013. They found his body, and the official report from the coroner said he suffocated, I guess, from crawling into a gym mat trying to get his shoe, and somehow during this he bled out and had blunt force trauma to the neck. And this is what the second we had. I guess you guys are gonna have the second coroner medical examiner on the next show, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and yeah, it was two. So you have two different autopsy reports, one from the official report and one from in private investigation that the family did.
Where we're talking about the power of the people to bring about. Had it not been for the power of the people, do you think that the story of Kendrick Johnson would have gained the momentum that it did?
No, that's so many stories right here. I mean, everyone's becoming hashtags. It's horrible, and that's all we have is each other pushing these stories forward. That's what Anonymous is all about. We're trying to create awareness for all these issues and make sure they don't happen again.
So when we talk about people power, how are the ordinary citizens empowered to create change and influence justice? How are Anonymous going about trying to influence and change justice just by the work that they do with the ops that they get involved with?
Well, I try to create awareness all the time. I can't speak for all the Anons. I'm one person, but I try to create awareness between all the issues I'm on, and I want people to know about them. We try to do it like press releases and we're going up against mainstream media's lies all the time. So we have to try to be as good as they are at pushing the truth out and battling and combating their lies. But one thing we have to realize is the people have all the power. They may not know it, but we have all the power. We can boycott, we can shut things down, we can protest, we can make a whole lot of noise, and we can make things difficult. The problem is we're not united and we're purposefully divided.
You know, 3%ers.
We're going to be looking at the Kendrick Johnson case in particular in greater detail next week with his mother. But what do you make of the fact that the two main suspects, the sons of the FBI officers, have never been properly questioned? Neither have they been made available for an investigation. How does that sit with you?
It seems odd because I asked Alex yesterday this question, and maybe Justin wants to think about it as well. Like, if your father is a federal agent, and if your sons were in an investigation for a murder, and you're totally convinced that they're innocent, would you not let them participate in the investigation?
Why wouldn't you let them clear their name? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, if it was me, I want my name cleared immediately. I go and say, "What do you want to do? I'm innocent. Let's get this handled. Let's get this out in the open. Let's find out who did this."
Alex,
but they haven't done that. They lawyered up and they didn't.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found absolutely remarkable was, although they were not available for any interviews or chats or investigations or whatever, there was a perfect opportunity for them to select a particular journalist, TV presenter, news presenter who spoke to them outside the offices of the FBI and gave them an opportunity to refute their involvement in it, full stop. There was no hard questions, there was no allegations put to them, they were just allowed to bat it off like they were playing tennis. And that's meant to satisfy us that means that they're innocent. How did you feel? Did you see any of that, Alex? Hi, Alex. Okay, let's move over to Justin very quickly. Hi, Justin.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen any of the footage supporting the Kendrick Johnson either investigation case or murder or death?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, I think this is going to be very unfair to ask you that question, but the question that I was probably trying to lead to from there is a continuation of how people power is having an effect, and what it does to cause external pressure on agencies empowered to find the truth and create justice. How does the court of public opinion influence courts of law? And looking at the power of people, how are ordinary citizens empowered to change, to create change and influence justice?
I think a lot of the reason, Kervin, not to interrupt you, but I think a lot of the reason people lawyer up, honestly, is because in the media, you're guilty before you go to court. Yep. You're guilty by perception. And I think that's why a lot of people do lawyer up. Do I think it's normally correct? No, but I believe that is one of the reasons a lot of people lawyer up, because the news media will crucify you before anything even takes place in the court system. I mean, look at situations like Nancy Grace. She gets on there and she crucifies people and tells them that they're murderers and they killed these people and they killed these children and they should get the death penalty, and they haven't even been to court yet. So I think that's a reason why their voice doesn't really matter, and they go to a lawyer to protect their. But
can I add that people lawyer up in America also because the Supreme Court has ruled that it is legal for police officers to lie to suspects to force them to say things that they don't want to say. And
that is absolutely correct.
And you need a lawyer to help you work through the maze of this corrupt police and district attorney and judge system that has completely tainted the American system of justice in ways that are unimaginable to the common person. If anyone opens his mouth to a policeman, a DA, or a judge without an attorney, you're just asking to die on the spot. You might as well just go ahead and say, I'm guilty.
In the state of Tennessee, in the state of 7C, Dr. Romy, in the state of Tennessee, if a person makes a complaint on an officer and it is found to be untrue, they are charged with filing a false report immediately.
Mm. So if justice be justice, why isn't the same in place for an officer who makes a false allegation against a civilian?
I agree.
It's part of the control. It's part of the control system. Why is it this way? if I shoot a policeman and I'm found guilty, in most states, that's an automatic death penalty. I mean, you are going to die you're going to be executed. And if a policeman shoots an American, especially a black, he'll probably get a medal for it. And if he's wrong, they throw a knife or a gun in the black man's hand. They shoot him 16 times. The DA does nothing. The guy gets promoted. So, Kervin, what you ask is so meaningless in a society where the concept of a human being is so different for those who are in uniform versus those who are not in uniform.
So then, therefore, can authority truly be influenced by people power? Tim?
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. How do we go about?
Yeah.
How do we go about?
Explain that.
Like I said before, it has to do with boycott. It has to do with protest. It has to do with making noise. Like, let me say about the Kendrick Johnson case. If it wasn't for a small group of Anon Crip and his crew over there, this would have been swept under the rug a long time ago. They pushed forward and they kept it going. I mean, I've been involved in so many cases where they would have been swept under the rug, even international cases. I work on Ops Arena Shim all the time. They want that to hear about it, and we're making noise. And as long as the people make noise and demand justice, at least it stays here. We don't have enough people demanding justice. That's the problem. Like I said, we're too divided. People need to realize we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together, and we need to fight the system.
But Tim, explain that a little more. I mean, tell me. I'm sorry, I'm the guy who likes the nuts and bolts. How can we influence authority? Because look, in Tennessee, I file a complaint and I'll be charged. I mean, if that's not a disincentive from not forcing changes on police officers and DAs, I don't know what is. I mean, other places, I think Alex brought up that one of the primary driving forces of police is revenge. They don't forget. And you report them, they track you down.
And a system seems... Go on.
No, that's a tactic to bring fear. We must not have... I mean, we can't be fearful of this. There's someone said yesterday, I think might have been Alex, said there's so many of us, they can't kill us all. And that's the way I've thought this forever. We have to fight back. We have to go against the police unions. We have to show up when there's meetings with police. The citizens have to be involved, and we have to come in numbers. Other than that, it's going to stay the same and get worse.
And here's the thing:
there's a saying.
So 1 second, Justin. The skepticism that goes with Anonymous can be understandable at times, but at the same time, is that not the very reason Anonymous or the Anons have more courage to continue to fight? Is that they're not as easily identifiable to be targeted and retaliation be meted upon because they don't? It's not known who they actually are. Would you say that's a fair point, Tim?
That's fair for many of them, but I doxed myself and gave up my identity to take away the KKK's power, threatening to dox me. So, I mean, I have no anonymity, anymore. And I still do this. You have to be fearless and you have to go forward regardless.
Absolutely.
Not every activist is an Anon.
Absolutely.
There's Black Lives Matter. There's Black Panthers. There's Brown Berets. There's so many activists out here that aren't Anons. And we have to support each other and we have to be there for each other. And we can't say this is my thing and this is their thing. This is our thing. They're all together. I try to work on as many ops and as many different causes as I can to help everybody. And that's how we all need to be.
And again, as much as I line up with the allegiance of Anonymous, I am not Anonymous. I am Kervin Julian, and I don't mind identifying who I am. People can just pull me out and they can find out anything they want to find out. It doesn't bother me because the bottom line is we have to have the courage to stand for what we believe. And people power can only be successful if the people stand forward and reveal themselves for what they believe. And I think that the longer people hide behind characteristics or non-faces, it continues to force feed the power to those who keep it. Are you back yet, Alex? Go on, Tim.
I am back. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
I am back.
Let me just can I say one thing real quick on that?
Go on, Tim.
There's a reason that most of us hide behind those masks. We're not hiding.
No.
But some of the things people are doing. I mean, we have Anons in the Middle East whose lives are in jeopardy all the time for information they're putting out. So I mean,
no, I do
people
understand
can't-
that. I do understand that.
Yeah.
I understand the reason why. The point that I'm trying to make is because of that's
Yeah.
actually being used against the movement as opposed to helping it to progress. Because without the identity, it's almost as if, well, you actually don't know who you're talking to. And I can also understand that angle. It's why I choose not to hide behind a mask, because I want them to know.
I think. But Kervin, there is a long history of the Three Musketeers, Zorro the Great, of people who hide behind masks
Absolutely.
to exert justice.
Even Batman did.
Yeah, Batman. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Believe me, most people think I'm wearing a mask. They wouldn't think I'd agree to be so ugly. But I mean, the point of the matter is I think that there's a place for those who do wear a mask and those who don't wear a mask. I do know that as a Jew who opposes apartheid in Israel, every time I bring it up, and I use my real name in the local community, obviously, and in the world, I mean, I am ripped in half. It's almost debilitating the way I'm treated. I say, for example, I don't think it's right to kill 2,800 people because they shot a few firecrackers at you and killed one or two people in Israel, and you killed 2,800, 80% are children and women. I think that's wrong. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. I'm a Jew and I'm an anti-Semite, right? And I'm like, are you crazy? But if you're a policeman or a former policeman, or you're fighting against the police forces, these people, and I think Sharon brought up earlier, their unions are so strong. Their unions control who get elected as judges. Their unions control who get elected as district attorneys. If a police union came out and said, Bill Jones is running for DA, he's soft on crime, he coddles the drug pushers, and he's going to let blacks tear down our community, and we're all going to be burned alive by these radical blacks. You can't vote for Bill Jones. He's soft on crime. He's soft on blacks. He's soft on drugs. That man has a chance of being elected as a DA or a judge like a snowball has of lasting in hell. And so you've got to break the police unions if you are ever going to bring justice. You have got to control the DAs if you're ever going to bring justice. And I think that it has to be people in mask and people not in mask. But I think that what these gentlemen are saying here today is we must unite. And yeah, you're going to be a little afraid, but you've got to overcome that fear, knowing that the reward is so far greater.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, I'm going to disappear for 1 minute as we give you our final Black History moment. And you guys are aware what it is. So bear with us. I will be back in 60 seconds.
Hi, it's your friend Ronnie Canada here to ask you an important question about Black history. Did you know? Did you know that Martin Luther King's mother was shot and silenced in 1974? This was only 6 years after MLK was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Alberta Williams King and Deacon Edward Boykin were shot during church services and killed inside Ebenezer Baptist Church within walking distance of her Martin Luther King's grave. After the loss of her son, Alberta King had carried on the work. He was prevented from continuing, and her support and efforts were significant to the civil rights movement. Her loss was left deeply by those pursuing equal rights. Though news of her assassination was largely ignored by popular media of the time, even today, not many are aware of her contributions or that she, like her son, lost her life in the pursuit of justice for all Americans. If you didn't know, now you know.
World Jam Global Radio, this is clarity.
Now, I mean, a lot of people didn't know that Martin Luther's mother was also assassinated. And as we talk about the power of people and people bringing justice to light, this is just nothing new. This isn't something that just started happening yesterday, last week, last month, or a few years ago, or 4 years ago, on the anniversary of the launch of Black Lives Matter. Black people have been fighting for justice, fairness, and equality from the beginning of, as long as we can remember, from the beginning of time. And are we any closer to getting this equality in justice today as we were back in the 60s? Tim?
Yeah, it's about the same. It's just different.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. And for a while, people were all saying, "Oh, you have a black president, this and that. There's no more racism." But you know what? There's always been racism. I mean, look at the natives. They go through more racism and more issues than any black person or any other group in America right now, and they have since the beginning. This land was stolen from them, and and they haven't gotten anything, and they're still I mean, Paul Castaway got murdered not that long ago, and they're like I think natives are the number one people killed by police. Black people are second.
It is, and for me as a black man, it's heartbreaking to see that although some of our lives appear to be a little bit better than it was back then, it still only amounts to what it appears that we're permitted to excel in, that we still excel, and yet some people are taking those crumbs as a real journey spent, and we've come a long way. I don't actually think that we've come that far at all. I just think that the ballpark's a little bit different, the playing field's a little bit different.
For a while it was unpopular to be a racist, I guess, and now it's becoming popular again, evidently, according to social media I've been looking at. And that's odd to me. You think we'd evolve and people would say, why hate people? We're all alike. We're all humans. We're all one. But some people can't get it. I think it's indoctrination from childhood or something still going on.
Let me add to that, too, from a sociological point of view. I think it's not only a matter of people not getting it. I think the fact is American history, American education has not dealt with the crimes that we have committed against the indigenous American, Native American population, against the Africans who we brought here.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Against the women, against the homosexuals who were trapped and beat up and castrated, against African Americans who were put in Tuskegee and experimented upon and given syphilis and genocide worse than the Nazis did. I mean, until we deal with our crimes as we forced the Germans, as we forced the Japanese, until we force our nation to deal with our crimes of genocide and torture against other people, both here and abroad, we cannot heal our nation. It is not a matter of admitting it. It is a matter of exposing it and dealing with it.
When we talk...
Right, and I think that's very important there, if I might add, Kervin here, Dr. Romay really hit it on the nail that we need to look back at history and all this hypocrisy that our founding fathers engaged in. And, granted, we're all human beings and they were who they were for this time. But this time period here where, people were actually made slaves and beaten, and you could rape them and things like that. That stuff, should have been done with. Unfortunately, that is still going on in our neighborhoods, and just with so much ignorance and the fact that white supremacy has tried to keep a lid on this. Now they're coming out in full force. Now they're coming out in full force with this Trump guy, which even has the Mexicans all upset over there talking bad about him because he's trying to provoke them and start a fight. And we don't need a crazy person like this in the White House trying to start World War III.
Well, here it is. A lot of this stuff that you've just mentioned, and especially what David just mentioned, is readily available on tweets on @IssuesToday Show, and also we've posted them on the Issues Today Facebook page as we've continued to do our Did You Know Black History moments that we've been sharing across the world with you, as well as on this show. And those points.
But Kervin, let me say this too. Everybody knows. I've never been through therapy, but, I taught medicine for many years as a professor. Everybody knows the first thing you have to deal with when you want to get treated for alcohol or drug or for pornography or for adultery or any other type of addiction or bad habit is the first thing you do is you admit that you have a problem.
Absolutely.
Now,
Amen.
America has a massive problem of racial injustice based upon race and economics. If you are poor, you will be abused. If you are black or Hispanic, you will be abused. And until we take that very first step and say, we have a problem. Hello, Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. Until we say that, we're going to have ass lurkers like Donald Trump and Rubio and other Republican nutcases running around saying, we're the greatest nation in the world. We're the greatest nation in the world. Well, obviously, they have never been to Denmark. to Switzerland, to Norway, to many other beautiful countries, the Ritz-Carlton in Paris, the Adlon in Berlin. They haven't a clue what a great nation in the world can be and what we can be. But until we admit and I'm a United States Army veteran, I love my country, but I am disgusted by all the people in prisons, in gulags, paying off the bonds of counties who borrowed money from the rich for the simple purpose of getting kickbacks. We must stop this incarceration. We must stop this imbroglio of incestuous whoredom among judges, police, and prosecutors, and we must admit we have a problem.
Hold on, Dr. May. I believe it was Germany. It was Germany's chancellor that finally admitted in 2013 that they did commit genocide against the Jews. So there is other countries that have systematic problems as well, like the United States.
But they admitted it.
I've been overseas as well. I'm a military and a combat veteran as well, and I can honestly say that there's other countries that have it far worse than we do. But I do agree with you. There is a lot of issues in the United States that need to be addressed.
Hang on a minute, Justin. Let me just take you there. I'll just like to challenge you on that. What other countries can you possibly mention that has systemic racism that is in a worse predicament than America right now?
Israel.
Yeah. Okay. Any more?
No.
Yes. Let's see, China.
I think we have all
enslaved African Americans. Parts of China still enslave Africans.
Yeah, but they only have 7 of them.
And also, it's also been pointed out that South Africa still has a massive problem themselves.
Yes, they do.
But it's easy to shift blame and start looking at someone else's shore when there is such a systemic problem right there in the United States of America. And irrespective of what you might want to believe or how you want to justify it, sometimes it can almost come across as if it's an ignorant smoke screen of naivety when you try to export what's going on on your shores.
Carvin, when one of the biggest issues right now among the Republicans is how are they going to prevent women from getting rid of a baby when a man rapes her and she's carrying the child of a rapist? They don't want her to get an abortion. When 2 people get married, like Elton John and his lover, and have children, they want to force those people to get divorced. And they don't acknowledge the love between 2 gay people or lesbian people. They don't want to have blacks and whites marry each other. They would like to reverse that law, the Loving versus Virginia case. There is some fundamental mental problems in America. Now, I do agree with Justin. I lived in Germany too, in the 8th Infantry Division. But let me say, ich spreche Deutsch fleißig. But let me say this very clearly, that Germany has paid billions and billions, over $200 billion in retribution and in restitution to Israel. And those people weren't even living at that time, but they're making amends. What money has America given in restitution for genocide against Native Americans?
And here's the big problem here. Here's the slam dunk, right? All these other countries that we talk about are not standing on the doorstep of other countries telling them how they should live. Now, here's the difference. You've got the United States of America that sees itself as the superpower and wants to go into every other country and every other nation and tell them how they should live. And yet they've got stuff in their own backyard that needs fixing, that they need to be fixing before they even have the gall. I mean, it's like me standing there as an alcoholic with a bottle in my hand as I swig it, telling to somebody else, I think you drink too much. Do you know what I mean?
It's like a doctor smoking and telling you to quit smoking. Shut up.
At the end of the day, America is not in a position to tell anybody how they should be living when they've got such a mess in their own backyard, especially with systematic racism taking place on their doorstep. And while we're sitting down there trying to talk about law, justice, equality, and fairness and everything else, just look at what's happening on the doorstep of the United States of America before they start going into other countries and telling them they need to be looking at their equality or their equal rights or their human rights issues.
Kervin, one of the issues like Dr. Romay brought up and you brought up, the Supreme Court has already passed Roe versus Wade. That's been passed. Homosexual marriage, LBGT, and all that, that's already been passed. It's been passed through our Supreme Court. That's why we have legislators, etc. The Republicans can try to reverse it if they want. It's already been passed through legislation. There's nothing they can do right now. Everybody wants to argue the abortion situation. Abortion is a personal It is a personal ideal if they agree or disagree. But it's been passed through Roe versus Wade. It's already been passed, so there's nothing they can do about try to reverse it. Let bygones be like, let's move forward. I'm like you and David. Let's find a solution to the problem. Let's keep addressing the issue, but let's find a solution.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again,
let's move forward. But you can't find a solution until you admit the problem.
Right.
I can go to the doctor all day long.
Listen, David, they are too busy debating the problem to try and find a way to fix it. They debate. They meet every week. Another tax at the expense of the taxpayer. To have another meeting to pay for their expensive limousines and their bodyguards that's got to take them from one place to another. To go debate again. But there's no fixing of the problem.
Go ahead. David, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
If we were to pay back African Americans for slavery, where do we start to pay who back? Because there's a lot of individuals that are here in the United States, like myself, that came from Irish and Italian immigrants that had nothing to do with slavery. So who's actually responsible for paying it back, and who do they pay back?
Well, in Germany, let me say this. In Germany, for the genocide against the Jewish people, there are 90% of the Germans living today did not live under Hitler's time, but 100% of Germans today are paying the price of those crimes of their grandfathers. And who is receiving the money? 100% of the people in Israel are receiving the money, but only 5% of Israelis lived during the Nazi time and were actually victims. So to answer the question, is there peace between Germany and Israel? Absolutely. Is there peace between Jews and Germany? Yes, there is, all over the world, even in America. So I'm not saying that we set a certain amount, but we did pay the Japanese who were victims of Roosevelt's crime against them by putting them in concentration camps.
That's correct.
I do think that maybe the restitution needs to be thought out in different ways. Maybe not as a payment in kind, not as a check, not as a piece of land, not as 7 donkeys or a horse, but maybe it should be paid out in terms of affirmative action that is not fought every inch of the way by the white majority who feels like something's being given away. We're only helping them regain. It's like, okay, you and I, Alex, are going to have a race, right? And Justin.
Right.
And Justin, I'm going to tie 2 50-pound weights on your legs. And Alex and I are going to take off. And then when we win the race, we're going to look back at you at the 20-yard line and say, you lazy little boy, you Negro, you're so damn stupid. Well, no, what we got to do now is say, hey, we cheated. We got to go over there, cut those weights off of him, and help him finish the race. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And
right. And let me just say, Kervin, if I may say something here, that the majority that Dr. Romay is talking about is basically the 1%. Okay, these are the people that have the money. Individuals like Dr. Romay, Tim, and our good friend Justin here, who are white. Let me just say that out there like it is. There are very few white people that get it. I feel sorry for my white brothers here because sometimes they are attacked. And they're called racist when in fact they're the ones out there, just like during Lincoln's time, that there was a certain segment that said, no, we can't have, these black people working underneath us and being treated as animals. And so the issue, right. And so this age that we're in here now, where Trump is trying to take over the land, basically, it seems like now. And you have a person like Bernie Sanders, who's one of you guys, who's like Dr. Romay and maybe not in that way of thinking, but who understands that Black lives do matter is the segment of people that we really want to try to reach out to. Those that can understand and appreciate a biracial marriage, for example, and no, what are you doing with that nigger bitch or that black guy or whatever, which has been the stigma of the United States for the longest time. This type of language continues to be said on a daily basis. And it's this type of toxic way of thinking that we finally need to address. As you said, if we don't admit this, then we continue in the state of denial. this is where we're always going to be stuck at. And this is where we have been stuck, and where people like Martin Luther King have been assassinated. And now we come to find out his poor mom, my understanding is she was just playing the organ there, and then they take her out. I mean, just it's beyond me of what they will try to do to try to keep people quiet by using fear like that. And as Tim and I talked about yesterday, yes, they cannot kill all of us. And I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I used to be afraid talking as a former police officer about what I experienced in Rampart, but that was my real life experience. And I believe that if I discuss this in a humane way, not trying to apologize for what I did, because I'm very sorry, but at the same time understanding that it was this culture that I was enveloped into, which became the Rampart scandal, that was part of Rodney King and all these problems that continue on in Los Angeles today. And so I'm very grateful here to my white brothers and all people of color here that we're finally coming together to discuss these issues that are going to affect the world worldwide. Because God help us, if these white people finally do unite, that are the majority that Dr. Romay referred to, many of which are KKK, many of which are, just straight out Nazis that don't care if we plunge ourselves into World War III, start building walls and then attacking our personal spaces. Right now, Apple is doing that fight here, not to let a Pandora's box loose, because, what do they want to do? They want to start rounding up people. I mean, there's so much stuff going on, as we saw with Hillary Clinton and her personal emails, that, you just can't cover up things anymore. And so we have to deal with these issues, and issues today is really, really on a fast track here to bringing them out.
Here's the thing. This takes us right back to the beginning where we started. We were looking at the power and justice. Power represents fear, and justice is the badge that represents equality. And until we start getting the police officers trained with the mentality that it's the badge that reflects honor, not the gun, we're going to continue to see individuals murdered and slaughtered and executed on our streets. Until we get police officers who step into the job, remembering the work and efforts that have gone into building the police in the community, that have raised those areas of trust and relationship, because relationships are important. And when the community cop can be returned back to the street. And again, with all of this pen pushing, they took the cop off the street and replaced him with a mechanized military-style police force that has no attachment to the community whatsoever. It's no wonder that there is no relationship between the local forces and the community, when they are so separated and divided by their thinking, their mentality, and their beliefs. Until they change the way that they train and recruit officers, as Alex has pointed out, rightly so on this show on many occasions, and we're going to continue to have cadets who are bullied in the playground, who want to come and exhort their power out onto the streets. And we're going to have individuals who are going to arm themselves to defend themselves, because we are going to protect our communities, because at the minute our communities are not safe, not even from law enforcement. And that is the difference. That is where the balance of power and justice lies. Justice is about equality. Power is about fear. And you cannot rule with fear. Most people who live in a family where they've been ruled with fear, normally it results in abuse. Abuse just results in bitterness, resentment, hatred, and anger. And all you're going to get is somebody prepared to retaliate at some point. That is not conducive to good community policing. So therefore, we need to remove the gun, we need to remove the power, and we need to get back to a place where it's all about justice, fairness, and equality. And a cop that the community can identify with, that they can feel proud to have walking their streets, and they can have a relationship with, and understand that while this guy is on my beat, on my streets are safe. We need to return back to that kind of policing. And only then will you see the systemic racism that's taking place and these lives that are being lost in America and right across the board come to an end. We need unity. We need people to start standing up and fighting for what they're believing and not hiding, and we need people like ourselves, shows like this and media. We need people who are progressing into media to turn around and say, I'm going to make a stand. I'm going to do this story, irrespective of what they want me to put out. Because until the truth is going out there and being heard, everybody else is going to continue to be force-fed a lie we can no longer live with. Now, gentlemen, yes. Sorry,
I used to do what you're talking about when I was a chief of police. I would go. The first thing I did when I first became chief, I was a lieutenant. When I first became chief, I turned around and I went to all the community groups. I went to started a neighborhood watch program. Went to the churches. Went to the civic leaders. And I really believe in a proactive police approach where you get out and you walk out of your vehicle and you do a walking patrol like it was when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s and like it was when you guys were kids in the 60s and 70s. You get out and you interact with the community. If you want to get to the true fact of policing today, majority of cities are only interested in revenue. Yeah. As in citations, speeding tickets, etc.
Absolutely.
We need to get back to the fundamentals of law enforcement and to policing itself.
Absolutely. Now, gentlemen, we've got to.
Kervin, yeah. Kervin, if I might add, Kervin, this is Alex on what Justin said. Keeping in mind that is what a police officer should be doing, what Justin Powers did here when he was chief, going out and meeting all these groups and people, developing relationships, and that's what's supposed to be done. But if you notice, Justin wasn't able to remain chief, and that's because he was a good guy. He witnessed corruption, and they forced him out, and they made life very miserable, and they continue to do that against him as he works there in the state of Tennessee as a private investigator doing criminal cases, and some of them also very racially charged cases where, once again, we have the DA going after the defendant who appears to be a very innocent subject. I know that he would not involve himself in a case that wasn't for real, and this is one of them here, but of course many across the country of where people have been framed and they've been murdered just by these sociopathic cops. And so officers like this are a rarity that cannot usually remain on the job, okay, if they don't go along with the program. And I think it's very important to be able to have a system, which is why we're advocating for what Justin coined the term truth exposers. It comes from you, Justin. I'm going to give him the credit here because it's a very powerful way of explaining exactly what's going on versus, addressing a person as a whistleblower, because the whistleblower title tends to give you're doing something wrong, I have to rat you out thing. No, a truth exposer tells the truth. He exposes it. And currently, there is not a environment, as we saw again with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, within their chain of command, all the way from the lowest deputy to the chief, okay, the sheriff of LA County, the nation's largest sheriff's department, okay, that not one person within that agency was able to step forward. And so this type of culture is what we're working to eradicate, to talk about here. It's good, as we said, that we continue to have this dialogue. I can only imagine there's other police officers and feds listening right now. And yeah, maybe they're pissed off listening to us discuss this. These are a bunch of idiots or whatever. You look at this guy thinking he knows it all, right? They tend to be like that, laughing because they know that it's true. And so, I'm not out to name any names or anything like that. I realize that this is a systemic issue. This does not just happen in LAPD or the sheriffs. This is happening all over the country. This is happening all over the world. Okay. And we need to address these topics in a way where it's safe for, police officers from within the ranks to be able to come forward and not be seen like Joe Crystal as a rat or like Justin here. You have a real hero cop here on this show, by the way. I know no one's else going to say it, but I know this man's story, and I meet him briefly also when I was in Ferguson. We just kind of ran into each other, and a little relationship took off to where we're here today now discussing this. But we saw that city burn down, and it was a very scary period. And the fact of the matter is people aren't going to put up with this crap anymore. There will be a revolution, and it's not being spawned by Anonymous. Anonymous is merely being the equalizer here and providing information that normally, in historic terms, we haven't been privy to. We don't know what the heck government has been doing or planning behind the scenes for the ages, but it happened. Like President Kennedy, who were assassinated, and they didn't know who it was. It's come out fully that it was the CIA that had the president killed. And that's the crazy part about it, And so we're dealing with the time period where nothing can be hidden anymore. We need to continue, and as I'll keep on repeating it, dialogue, and to also get rid of that denial, which Dr. Romay touched brilliantly on. And as we continue towards the future, I pray that, we as a group, the activist circle, we can maintain a cohesiveness, as Tim mentioned so lovingly, that it could be everybody, the Brown Berets, Black Panthers. All these groups here who for the longest have been demonized because they stood up to the white man. they need to come forward now and like I said, be seen and not be afraid, and for all of us to work together to finally stop this genocide that's been going on for the ages.
Absolutely. And just before we move on to Dr. David Reme's last thoughts, let me just say this. You talk about truth exposers. I want to bring Tim in here just for a final thought. But that's been the remit of Anonymous for as long as I've known it, is to embarrass and expose corruption, embarrass and expose corrupt police officers, and embarrass and expose corruption in government and in higher places that govern over us. And that fight will continue as long as Anonymous have breath to breathe. Tim, I just want to thank you for the work that Anonymous do from the bottom of my heart. And there are many members who I operate with who follow the work of Anonymous, and I kind of like to help bring Anonymous to life here in the UK. But final thoughts from you on the KJ case, systematic racism, and what can be done in order for us to start bringing about some equality to level the playing field.
Thank you for having me on the show, number one. And I think it's all related from the KJ case to any other case. We need to take the power from police unions as much as we can. And like I was saying on the inner text right now, I believe cops, maybe they should work in the neighborhoods where they live so they know the people. It's harder to look at people as enemies if you know them and you see them every day.